This documentary is considering and critically analysing the various opinions on the controversial topic of the effects of climate change on individual species. The documentary looks at countries of Australia and the Great Barrier Reef, the Arctic and polar bears, and the Amazon. Causes of climate change and the issues surrounding climate change will be focused on. The documentary looks at the sides of whether climate change is being influenced or accelerated by human impact, and whether the effects of climate change are beneficial or devastating to species. Climate change is a considerable variation in either the mean state of the climate or in its variability, which carries on for an extended period, usually decades or longer. Climate change can be triggered by natural, internal processes or external forces, as well as persistent anthropogenic changes in the composition of the atmosphere or in land use. Climate change is a fact and is confirmed by the accelerated retreat of mountain glaciers, rapid reduction of Arctic sea ice, breakup of floating ice shelves, and increased melt speed of Earth's three ice sheets, Greenland, West and East Antarctic. Most climate scientists agree the main cause of the current global warming trend is human expansion of the greenhouse effect. The theory of the greenhouse effect by human and other factors is supported. The effect of this is that global temperatures are set to rise 4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2100, if nothing is done to stem greenhouse gas emissions. Supporting this suspected rise in temperature is Graph 1 with the changes in temperature in the Northern Hemisphere. The current effects and potential effects of climate change include melting of polar ice caps and flooding, irregular weather patterns, changes in food production, drought and desertification, changing in ecosystems and an impact on human health. The effects of climate change not only impact on the environment, fragile ecosystems and biodiversity, but also humans. A specific concern is the impact that climate change will have on individual species. According to a study conducted by Monash University, the researchers stated that organisms will have 3 different ways in reacting to climate change: stay in their same location as they can tolerate the changes, or alternatively, adapt to change through the process of evolution. Organisms could also move to a more appropriate habitat if that option is possible. The last option would be that the species or organisms die out. The species may decrease in population or eventually margin to extinction due to an incapability to restore the population. Climate change impacts upon the species distributions, their reproductive timing and season, and migration due to the changes in temperature and the external environment. According to Monash University, the capacity of plants and animals to respond to environmental change rests primarily with genetic diversity. The speed of any adaptive evolutionary change will be critical to organisms' responses to rapid climate change. The point of view stated here is derivative of factual proof. The proof has been supported by NASA, a government-based institution employing many highly capable scientific researchers in many fields of science, including climatic. NASA, on the other hand, is a highly credible source because NASA is one of the nation's leading scientific institutions that base their findings and results on facts, which creates an unbiased conclusion, and peer-reviewed scientific journals. The only questionable credible source would be the statement of The Guardian, but it is supported through a graph from a peer-reviewed scientific journal, which therefore makes their opinion based on a reliable and credible source. Admittedly, in regards to people, place, and profit, only the place has been truly considered in this argument, as the discussion is only concerned about the place and effect of the people. Governments have a minimal amount of policies that attempt to reduce carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, such as the carbon tax. The minimal and slow progress to reducing their global emissions is due to the growing population in which major industries are attempting to supply for. A rapid change in industrial work would have a definite impact on the human society, which governments do need to consider. The climate has changed for centuries and will continue to do so with or without the help of mankind's minuscule contributions to CO2. According to John Coleman, the founder of the Weather Channel, and various other critics have called the theory that human use of carbon-based fossil fuels will lead to catastrophic global warming or climate change a hoax. According to NASA, the major contributor to the greenhouse effect is water vapour. This isn't a man-made factor to the climate change issue. Water vapour is known to be Earth's most abundant greenhouse gas, but the extent of its contribution to global warming has been debated. Using recent NASA satellite data, researchers have estimated more precisely than ever the heat-trapping effect of water in the air, validating the role of the gas as a critical component of climate change. Water vapour is a natural climatic cause to climate change. The points of view made in saying that climate change is happening with the help of mankind's influence or not is an opinion that was made on a factual basis. The topic of climate change is a highly opinionated one, but there is factual evidence supporting both sides of the argument of whether mankind has caused it or the degree of impact it has on species, ecosystems, and biodiversity. The statement made by John Coleman is coming from an incredible source. John Coleman is only a weatherman and renowned for being a climate change skeptic. NASA, on the other hand, is a highly credible source because NASA, or the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is one of the nation's leading scientific institutions. The statement about water vapour being a major contributor is based on evidence through their extensive research, which gives supportive evidence of their findings. This makes it credible. Both of these sources have only considered place and concluded whether the people were a major contributor to climate change or not. The Australian government having a minimal amount of policies in place for climate change implies that the Australian government does not consider climate change a big threat to species and considers the people and profit in their decisions. One of North Queensland's top marine physicists from James Cook University, Professor Peter Ridd, has accused fellow scientists of exaggerating the threat that climate change poses specifically to the Great Barrier Reef. Professor Peter Ridd said increasing temperatures could actually be good for the reef as they flourish better in warmer conditions in comparison to lower temperatures. There are an estimated 20,000 polar bears in the wild, and they depend upon the Arctic weather for their livelihood. Increasing global temperatures are causing polar ice caps to melt. This is detrimental to polar bears as polar bears spend the majority of their lives on ice sheets and prefer to gather food from the safety of the ice sheets. In the map shown, the population of polar bears is shown graphically. There are very little stable populations in the habitat of the species, and there are more declining populations. This emphasizes the negative effect that climate change has on this specific species. In regards to the issue being discussed, I can conclude from this research that climate change did and does occur naturally, and when it occurred gradually, it gave species time to adapt to the changes in external environments. When climate change happened abruptly, the effect on species usually led to mass extinctions or decline in species population. That being said, modern industrialization and human impact has increased the rate of which climate change is occurring, and the impact of climate change on various countries and species. Rapid climate change is leading to decreased populations in species through the destruction of habitats such as the polar bears mentioned, and the inability of the species to adapt quickly enough. This leads to declines in species populations which give food shortages to the predator species, and this creates a domino effect within the ecosystem. The issue is a highly opinionated one which is in constant debate from facts and research supporting both sides of the argument, being whether climate change affects species negatively or not, and whether climate change is heavily influenced by human impact or not. Other countries such as South America and the Arctic are experiencing climate change, and the species are being affected by the rapid rate of climate change occurring.